Hello and welcome to the Average Tabletop Gamers. We have another wonderful lockdown podcast video cast for you this evening. Hello, and here we all are. Hey, hello, folks. So you've got the lockdown, whatever we're calling this kind of cast thing going on. We're going to do a little bit of entertaining tonight, talking about crossovers from movies. I'm Gary.
I'm Ian.
I'm Ben, and I'm not frozen in time by the looks of it.
And I'm Sven, and and obviously we didn't rehearse that intro, so no one knew who to speak.
Which is why I was really struggling when you were waving. I thought, is that you telling Gary not to talk? We're still in the intro screen, or is that...
It was a bit of both.
And Gary just waves back, goes, "Hi, Sven."
It's a bit of
Has
both,
he?
but
Because he's absolutely Gary's frozen on mine.
Am I?
I've just got this slightly
he's fine on mine, which is the one that's important.
What that means is he screenshotted it for later use.
I really haven't.
And that'll be making the cut. So after all that nonsense, what are we talking about again tonight, Gary?
So we're going to be looking at crossovers such as things into gaming, wargaming, from TV, comic books, popular fiction, unpopular fiction as well.
But also like computer game crossovers as well. So where we've had not necessarily because computer games to board games, there's quite a few crossovers of that, but maybe like some of the board games that have translated well, or board game IP that's translated well into computer games.
I like to think of it as as pop culture to nerd culture.
Oh, that's a nice way to think about it. Yeah. So before we dive in there, just because I'm missing my usual fix on a Tuesday night. So before we dive in, what have you all been doing, in the hobby space?
Well, I'll start off. I've took a bit of a break from doing my Adeptus Titanicus figures. I've been having a look around at potential models like 6mm tanks and 6mm infantry to go along with them, because there's a variety of supplies out there. Because I'm not paying eBay prices for the old figures. But I've also been building my Sylvaneth figures for Age of Sigmar.
Oh,
So
okay.
been going on a bit of a building fest, covered in little bits of plastic chip-ins all the time.
Cool.
Ben?
I picked up a BattleTech box last week, so I've slowly been having a look at that. Doing a lot of tabletop roleplay stuff, basically reading, obviously. Found a really cool Kickstarter called Bracalonia, which is a 5th Ed add-on for a whole new world based on Renaissance Italy. So that could be really interesting as well. Really nice looking thematic. That Machiavelli, Bravosi from Game of Thrones, that kind of culture.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Carnival stuff that's been around lately, the last couple of years. It's been very popular. It's even getting terrain on TT Combat now. That.
Yeah. Well, there's some nice bits for that where you can get like they do like a whole City of Venice bit, don't they? Like there's I've seen a lovely Venice board.
That's their game, isn't it? Carnival.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They produce it, so.
Yeah, it works really well for Mordheim terrain as well.
And they've even done a crossover of Carnival into Rumble Slam, which is one of their other big games, because they do like a masked men kind of crossover of the Carnival style thing with the ruffs and the Pirello type masks and things.
I thought you were going to say a Phantom of the Opera style there.
Who do I owe the fiver to? Because Gary was less than 3 minutes before mentioning Mordheim there, so who had that?
You said hobby. It's a broad subject.
What I've been doing this week, to skip back, and you will have already seen these. If you haven't, I'll put the links up here because the videos for these will be going out just before this podcast goes out. But I've been building these MDF pre-painted kits from Micro Art Studio. So this is from their Design for Infinity range. So there's some reviews and some build videos of these that are going on. So I spent some time with that amazing smell of burnt MDF or HDF and putting these together and film some reviews. So you see, I'll put some a little thing you can click up there if you want to go and watch those, or you can click them in the link below. And then otherwise,
they look lovely from the pictures you've been putting out.
Yes.
They've looked
They look
really
really
nice.
good.
the whole range looks fantastic, and I think for like anything Judge Dredd or sci-fi, cyberpunk themed, it's going to be
Necromunda.
yeah,
for
they're
workshop
gonna be
as
Perhaps
well.
looking
even
for that.
Infinity.
Yeah, or even Infinity.
Would they fit? Would they work with more time, Gary?
Well, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say more time.
It's
Space Mordheim.
cyber more time, and otherwise we've been continuing our role play campaign with our friends, where we're playing futuristic tax and customs inspectors, which,
It's more exciting than it sounds, folks.
although in one particular adventure, I'll just recap this is a little while ago, in one of our first games we played, I actually used a spreadsheet to actually do a tax calculation, someone's payroll calculation, to work out whether they were overpaying or underpaying tax on 324 clones of themselves. So that's a good
Wow.
life gaming crossover there. My knowledge
Yeah.
of payroll taxation and roleplay. So we did a bit more of that, and luckily no one did any tax calculations.
And that's been pretty much my hobby. I'll finish it off after, as I ask the question. I've kind of, other than that, it's been lots of lockdown computer gaming for me,
So
which
that-
kind of leads us back around to the where we all started tonight.
So crossover stuff then. So has anyone got any favourites?
So I think
I've got some real bottom of the pile favourites.
go on then.
just get Mutant Chronicles out the way now.
but-
Get Mutant Chronicles
Oh,
off your
I just
chest
don't-
now.
Oh,
Ben's more time, you mean?
Is that not the one that they crossed over the other direction as in there was a film, a really good film with Ron Perlman
I will
that they
fung
turned
you.
it.
Did you
I will
say
come
good
round to your
film?
house and I will fung you. Oh, genuinely. I mean, let's not even bother going any further with that. Mutant Chronicles. If you've ever seen the movie, if you've not seen the movie, don't do yourself a favour and watch it. Stay away from it. Look at the IP. Go and look at the roleplay game. Look at the board games and all that kind of stuff. Stay away from the movie. There, I've got it off my chest. I hadn't even thought of that one for this subject. That's how much I dislike it. And it wasn't until one of you just brought it up. No, honestly, genuinely, I've got other stuff on the list that I can go on about. But we go on about the Mutant Chronicles film pretty much every episode, so I don't think I need to go into it.
Well, the one I was
You go about it.
the one I was going to bring up, which is probably the earliest example of a gaming to TV or movie crossover, and one that probably affected all of us in our early lives, which is the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon.
Yep.
If you think about the first time we ever heard about Dungeons and Dragons, probably, especially me and Ian, because I guess we're a little bit younger than you two, but that was probably just by a couple of years. But I mean, like, when was Dungeons and Dragons out? We must have been 6 or 7. Was that, in fact,
The cartoon or the
cartoon?
Original cartoon.
Cartoon was
about
early
10. Gary
80s.
must have been about 35.
I was 35 stone, I think. No, I think came out. I think came out 82. I was about 10, 11.
Oh,
I'm gonna do
My
fact check.
favorite cartoon at the time.
I've got
Absolutely
the DVDs
loved it.
downstairs. I bought them a couple of years
So
ago.
have I. I also went and hunted down the never filmed final episode.
Never filmed.
90,
So it was like literally the script and some of the art shots that would have
so actually
finished
never
it off.
filmed. I thought you.
Genuinely never filmed.
The Getting Home episode.
They never got home.
Getting Home episode. I know, but that's what the last episode is, isn't it? Mythical
Spoilers.
Getting Home episode.
Yep.
So it was first. So you're talking. It was actually aired the first time.
1983.
83 to 85 is when it was aired. But obviously, given we're in the UK and it was like Saturday morning TV fare for like cartoon time on a Saturday morning or after school. I remember it probably but I remember watching it well in like probably 87, 88 with my mates, because I remember being near the end of first school, and still watching it and having like one of my mates had like a T-shirt with Venger on it. But that was probably the first one where, and again that was back then Dungeons and Dragons meant nothing to us other than the cartoon. Didn't
Yeah.
even know it was a game or anything like that. And so I think that's got to be the starting point for a crossover. And I think it's actually quite
There was
faithful.
another one. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was going to say it's actually quite faithful to the character classes in a way. You know, they basically had, here's a ranger, here's a barbarian, here's an Amazon, here's a
Cavalier.
paladin. Was he a paladin or cavalier?
No, he was a cavalier.
Yeah.
Or paladin, effectively.
So it was AD&D second edition just after Unearthed Arcana had been released.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because that's where the cavalier character.
Also, it formed your basic.
I bought Unearthed Arcana as well.
Yeah.
And also, if you think they made a pretty decent group for any kind of online MMO raiding party.
Yeah.
You had a tank, you had a DPS, you had your wizard/healer.
Yeah.
And thief as well, didn't you? The rogue.
Yeah,
there
rogue.
was a rogue.
And you had the classic you had the classic D&D monsters in it as well. I mean, obviously you've mentioned Venger, who was like their own big bad, but then you had Tiamat, the Queen of the Dragons. You had there was an episode all around the Beholders.
Yeah.
There was
Plus a lot of the ancillary smaller characters you'd meet if you'd been role playing. I mean, I was
was it Bugbears?
Bugbears, yeah. There was Bugbears in the swamp.
Opposite episode, yeah.
Yeah, I was aware of
Amazing,
Dungeons
that's
and
my
Dragons
only
going
thing
into a local gaming store, but I was going in there for computer games. I think I've already said this on the previous video where kind of like I'd walk past all these amazing role-playing books through a little miniature section into the back where the computer games were. But I always lingered there while my mates were just voraciously looking at computer games. But definitely that crossover. I think the movies have always been a bit of a stinker, though, to be fair.
So I remember, like getting into comics as an early age, and one of my mates at school came in and he had, I think one of his uncles or something had given him some, like, old school Marvel comics. The ones where you had adverts in for Nintendo, like the Nintendo NES and stuff like that, and all that kind of stuff. And they always had in them an advert for the D&D computer games that you get. So there was the games that were built that were in the Forgotten Realms.
Forgotten Realms, the Forgotten Realms ones. Because I remember Baldur's Gate.
Oh,
it was a great one from around there. Kind of much later.
Yeah, Baldur's Gate was like 96, 97 when that was out. The first one I remember, and there was a few.
They were a huge inspiration for the original text adventures you'd get on very early PCs as well.
There were so many other games that kind of spawned off that, though, wasn't there? Things like Gauntlet and
Gauntlet was a fantastic game. Actually, thinking about it,
I remember playing that first at Kel's house on the Commodore 64.
I can still hear so there was loads of different. It was top-down Gauntlet, and there was loads of different monsters in it. I can still hear the noise that the death monster that was unkillable would make as it came towards you, and it was like nails on a chalkboard.
But then Dungeons and Dragons, I guess, if you go back to movies, because obviously you said about the TV show, there was a Dungeons and Dragons movie in the 2000s, maybe. I want to say 2000-ish.
With Jeremy Irons.
There was more than one.
There absolutely was more than one. The second one was The Return of Damodar, I believe.
Wow.
I couldn't tell you. I refused to watch them. I watched the first one.
I could tell you. I just need to go and get the DVD cover.
I watched the first one because of all of the stuff that you expected from it. So there was wizards and dragons. And
there was a dragon. There was a dungeon.
Yeah, that's basically it. And Thora Birch, if I remember rightly.
Oh, I can't remember.
But I think Thora Birch is the queen.
I think the other thing though that D&D spawned off was its book range.
Yes. Yeah. And then again, cross-spawning back from those to things like Dragonlance. So Dragonlance, brilliant role-playing world, great series of books, not a very good animated movie.
Was it Weiss?
Yeah,
books?
Weiss and Hickman.
Weiss and Hickman, yeah.
And so many born-off books like this. But yeah, the animated movie came from Dragonlance. Awful.
So I think we've lingered.
So bad.
But if you look where D&D is
going
today,
back to 1983.
back to 1983. Yeah, I mean it's
There was
you talk.
another. I go on. You were going to say?
No. I think it's one of those. It's interesting to see where D&D is today. You know, it's in a very, very healthy position as a brand. You know, and I think it's going to be tough for it to like wobble itself really, because I think it's in a really great space.
Well, the most modern crossover for D&D into modern cultures, of course, is Stranger Things, which we've talked about a few times on the show, and we've said that, you know, about the fact that Stranger Things introduced a lot of people to Dungeons and Dragons, and to the point where Wizards actually released a Stranger Things box set, two Stranger Things box set. And I know the first one I've seen where you can actually, you know, you actually get the figures of the Demogorgon and you play the actual campaign that the kids are playing in Stranger Things, which I think is a brilliant crossover marketing.
Well, Ralph Parther was still producing the Demogorgon figure, and they didn't price gouge as well when Stranger Things came out. They still kept selling it at like £2.85.
Haven't D&D done another starter box set?
Yeah.
So was it Rick and Morty or?
Yeah, which is a weird one.
They released a Rick and Morty. It was almost a core rule book.
Yeah.
Yeah, so odd. But those are that's the beauty of IP, isn't it?
Well, I think it's a very clever one. It's a very clever one that Wizards have done, because they own two such big IPs, which is D&D and Magic the Gathering. So I think they're up to three source books for Dungeons and Dragons that are in the Magic the Gathering planes.
The thing as well is for D&D, I think the big thing it's done crossover wise, it's come full circle. It's crossed back round to role playing. You know, where it's got people role playing again. It's the only one that's done it.
Yeah.
Right there. I mean, there's quite a few companies in the past that have tried to build an audience through crossovers, and I think sometimes rather than building it's made their IP stronger, but I don't think it's necessarily translated. So I mean, if we go to Games Workshop and Games Workshop's forays into various different types of media, I mean, I know we've got talk of Eisenhorn, the TV show, coming along.
Yeah.
But if you think about the number of times, I mean, if you remember, probably 2000-ish, where Workshop commissioned, like Black Library commissioned that film called Inquisitor.
Oh.
That was absolutely terrible, and it looked like someone had like gone
done it in a garage.
Arcade. They'd raided an arcade in the 80s to get the vector graphics and things like that for the VX. I've got a VHS copy of it sitting.
I don't think I've ever heard of that.
There's a reason.
You're lucky.
It was like I think
terrible.
They sold it in. They sold it at Games Day 2000, and then that was it. But then it was not long after that they actually, it was before that, it was probably mid-90s, where Workshop tried to jump into the computer realm a bit more when the real-time strategy games were kind of kicking off, and they had like Curse of the Horned Rat?
Curse of the Horned Rat, yeah.
And there was another one. There was another one that was the same.
With Godric and Felix in
well,
it's like the early Total War series.
The Undead one first, wasn't it? There was a couple of the real-time strategy games, and I bought them. Again, I think I bought a copy of it where you got a free key ring, like when Bulldog Buckle Company were doing, like, you know, the key rings and stuff for thingy. I've still got a Curse of the Horned Rat, or the Curse of the Horned one. It was called key ring, kicking around somewhere that I got in that box set.
I just think for a company with such really big IP, I don't think Workshop's always treated it very well, and it's never transferred very well. It always looks like bad LARP.
The ones that have transferred well was like Dawn of War.
Mm-hmm. Dawn of War was a cracking game.
Yeah, Dawn of War superb. But weirdly, the ones that I think have worked really well are the IPs or the games that they kind of put to one side. So Space Hulk, the computerized version of Space Hulk, superb. Blood Bowl, the computerized versions of Blood Bowl, absolutely brilliant. So good. And Dawn of War, and then every single app game that you can possibly imagine is now kicking around because Games Workshop would, sell the IP.
What was that Chaos one that we were playing last year, Ian?
Oh, it was a mobile. It was a bit of a gacha game, but it was a mobile game.
You were like a chaos warlord, like you were chaos
Yeah,
lord.
resource build up your city. It was a skin of a lot of very similar kind of games, but
yeah, I know
it was
which one
very
you mean.
much pay to win, and I just got annoyed with it because it was one of these ones where essentially you couldn't just play the game on your own at your own pace. Like you were expected to join a clan or like join an alliance or whatever, and then essentially the alliances, as they do with all sorts of games like that, the alliances just become like playgrounds for the power hungry, and you get booted because you haven't logged on for 7 hours or whatever, and it's just like I can't be doing with that. And
no,
I mean, Games
those
Workshop
type of games just really annoy me.
and Games Workshop, they do feel a bit like they've almost blanket approached it. So if you look on like the Android store, I imagine it's the same on the Apple. There's just so many games that are using their IP. And they released so many games, as in through the years, and a lot of them were really poor, as in really, really poor. Like some of their, like I got their Mordheim game, and I didn't like that
so
at all.
bad.
I got Battlefleet Gothic, which I quite liked. I actually thought that wasn't too bad an experience to play. But the best of their games that I've played was Warhammer Online.
yeah, that was actually really good.
Yeah, I heard that was good.
That was
wasn't
like
a fan.
2009, 2010.
Yeah.
Because that was the thing where it was one of the only games at the time that kind of threatened World of Warcraft. And it was
And it didn't threaten World of Warcraft.
Well, it did, because World of Warcraft was on a bit of a lull anyway. There was players dropping off because I think they were, getting a bit bored of everything. Warhammer Online came out and had all these new features in, like all these new battle types and things. And the first few months we played Warhammer Online, it was amazing. Like, you couldn't move for tripping over things to do and people to fight. And within 6 months, World of Warcraft had basically rolled out a load of updates and put all the same battle features into WoW that were in Warhammer Online. And Warhammer Online was like a ghost town. Like you'd literally, we would stand around in areas. Like there was these areas where you would go, and every so many minutes, when so many people turned up, it would boot off and you would fight for an objective thing to capture the flag. But you didn't go to a battleground. They were just areas of the map, and you could be standing there for ages, for like about an hour, before enough people turned up to trigger it.
Yeah. So I was looking at the time. So Warhammer Online came out at the end of one of WoW's expansions.
Yep.
And I think 3 or 4 months after Warhammer Online was out, WoW released Wrath of the Lich King, which to this day is probably their most successful release as part of the Warcraft, the World of Warcraft.
I think the thing with Workshop is, for years, Workshop have been so protective over their IP. Even like comically so. We've all heard of like various different things where they've tried to stop people from using the term space and marine within the same book together or something like that. And because of that, they try to do everything in house. So it was only when they kind of teamed up with like people like Slytherin. There's a Slytherin Studios that did like a lot of their real-time strategy stuff, and they actually, they went, well, you know what, we've got really good IP and we'll license that. And I mean, if you look at the licensing that Workshop are doing now, with all the stuff they're doing to like Hatchet Publications and even Bandai, look at that Bandai figure they've released, and it's not my bag, but
it's very expensive. I've seen one. Someone put some pictures of it on a Facebook group I'm in, and they put some pictures of it in. It's actually really nice. Not for the money they were charging though, but
that's Bandai money. That's what you pay for to get into that hot side of the hobby. I think Workshop have got the idea right now, though. I think the rumours of all the stuff that's coming out and has come out over the last 12 months and the stuff that's due out in the next 12 months.
So in the late 90s, when I was a store manager and had been in the business for about 5 years with Workshop, we were always a bit disappointed that they didn't try and expand and leverage their IP more. And ironically, they're doing it now, 25 years later. And we'd say, well, what about action figure Space Marines? Or we don't want kids to get into the hobby that are too young. And this was in a period when they were driving the age for the hobby too young. people were talking about like statuettes and said, "Oh, we won't do stuff like that." And this is in the germination phase for Forge World, and then you've got Funko Pops now, and and the way that they've got the merch tie-ins and the T-shirt stuff was a bit lame and all in house, and they didn't approach people to manufacture it for them. And I think they've got a fantastic IP, but it's always never sat very well. I've just downloaded for free on Xbox one of their latest games, Martyr. It's a Diablo rip-off with a little bit of a campaign in it, which is quite nice. But the graphics are pretty bad. The text and the spelling in it's pretty bad, and the script and the acting work's awful. And it just looks like it's done on the cheap, and it just feels like I'm playing a game that's 15 years old, and it's not. It was released a few years ago. It's not that old a game.
They were never, they've never been very until quite recent.
They're getting a lot better.
And I think that the future for crossovers for the Games Workshop IPs is really rosy. There's a lot of really good stuff coming. Obviously the Eisenhorn TV show, which is
I'm losing you there, Ben.
We keep losing you,
Ben. Ben, you keep cutting out there. I wasn't sure it was just me.
I think it might be my connection, to be fair. But we can crack on and just have to see how it goes.
I think the future for Games Workshop's IPs and its crossover potential is superb. I think they've got a lot of goods come up, and I think it's a matter of time before they hit the big screen.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it,
or a premium TV.
If you think about Games Workshop, though, however, one of their most successful crossovers isn't Games Workshop IP out; it's someone else's IP in, which is when Lord of the Rings came out and New Line Cinema approached Games Workshop and said, "Would you, you've got a history of doing Lord of the Rings, yada yada yada. Would you mind doing some bits?" And I think Workshop at the time thought, "Well, this will be good for 2-3 months on the shelves while the film's out." And it became almost the third core game for a while. I mean, it was huge.
It did. It was good.
They're supporting it again now as well.
Yeah.
It's always going to have the interest, and I think that's an IP they're always going to have in the background now. But I don't think it's nowhere near what it was. The interest in it was always going to be fleeting. But for people who are big fantasy fans and like very rich, space opera kind of like the big fantasy, it really appeals to them. It's got such a classic appeal that it won't go away. However, it's never going to bring people in its droves. We're talking about it's a movie that's 20-year-old now.
I think at the time, though, given how accurate the figures were to the movies, I think that was because you could go to Travelling Man and you could buy a figure that you could buy an action figure of Gimli or someone like that, or of Gandalf, and they would be quite good because it's an action figure and that's what they do. Whereas traditionally, games miniatures and stuff, and even games pieces and board games were never that good a representation. But Workshop at that time just had the figure so spot on that it was so much.
They were very faithful.
I mean,
very faithful.
To the point where I think New Line Cinema had a lot of hand in, the design studios and the directors and that having a lot of hand in actually saying, vetoing the figures and okaying the figures and making them be re-sculpted to the point where they were happy with them and stuff like that, and making them so movie accurate. I mean, I don't know if this is a true one of those apocryphal stories that was doing the rounds at the time, but one of the cave troll in the Mines of Moria, the model for that was sent back to have an extra wart put on his belly so that it matched the movie version or something like
that. The big one was wrinkles in Gandalf's hat. There was someone from Wetwood went, well, actually, if you look at this picture that you've took it from, there's an extra wrinkle, and that'll go and redo the model.
Right.
Ben, I think you're coming across quite faint, Ben. So I think we've talked over you a couple of times there, mate. So I don't know if you had something you were wanting to chip in there with as well.
Whatever it was really insightful and very good.
That's what I thought. That's why I came back to you, mate. That's why I thought.
But I think the moment's gone. I think we've lost.
Okay.
So I think Workshop is it's interesting to see how they play with such a strong IP that it's very different from when we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons to what Games Workshop do with it. And it's a beloved IP, But it's like this Eisenhorn movie. It's inquisitorial. I think the language Dan Abnett put into the books, that's what I'm looking forward to. So I'm looking for a bit of a departure because every Workshop computer game, the language is so stilted, it's horrible. You know, it doesn't read very well. It's very dogmatic and preachy, and it's awful.
Although,
You know,
to this day, anytime someone mentions Space Hulk to me, I immediately default to the Amiga version of Space Hulk and have to go,
yeah.
Bethor, get out of my way.
Oh.
But yeah, I mean,
the cutscenes for that were done by Jervis Johnson, by the way.
all right. I mean,
With where you've got the Dark Angel with his mouth going 10 to the dozen.
yeah,
It's actually Jervis Johnson does the voiceover for that.
nice.
He's the guy who designed the first Blood Bowl, folks, and the second, and technically the third.
So we've dwelled on Workshop and its crossovers. I mean, we could probably do like an entire podcast series on the various crossovers from Workshop over the years, and probably do 3 whole series on the amount of bad computer games they've made and why. So
I want to go back to the mid '80s.
Okay, I mean, so do we all.
Because I've got some, yeah.
Diddle-diddle.
So in 1983, the same time that Dungeons and Dragons cartoon was around, there was another cartoon that I used to watch religious that spawned a role-playing game off the back of it, and that was Robotech.
Yeah.
Stiff goes, what is this Robotech?
I don't recognise that cartoon names, and I watched a lot of cartoons in the 80s.
It's all available on YouTube. I'll send you a link.
All right, found it.
So Robotech was a great cartoon, and that got bought up. The IP got bought by Palladium Books, who had just successfully launched the Palladium role-playing game, which was a bit like D&D meets Rollmaster, and then more complicated than all of them. But not content with that, they then bought the IP for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh, really? Did they?
Nice.
Yeah. And so that's where the TMNT role-playing game came. And they actually got it right with that. Using the same mechanic, it really worked. Very odd.
It was. I may have it somewhere still. I doubt it though. I did own the Ninja Turtles role-playing game, and it was the best thing and the most fun was sitting with your mates and generating characters, because the role-playing was pretty naff, but the character generation was hysterical.
Yeah. I remember I played in one game, which was it was every Friday night after we'd been to the local nightclub / rock disc, whatever you used to call it in those, where we were all playing genetically enhanced hippos, who were based on movie character stereotypes. There was Don Hippone. I was Hippo, which was a Rambo clone. It was a beefcake with an MC. But you know, you start playing at 3 a.m. on a Saturday morning. It's never gonna go well.
I was Alan the Electric Hamster.
This has nothing to do with roleplay. That was just your clubbing name, was it?
Average Friday night for me, mate.
That still is. But yes, so those were 2 kind of IP crossovers that, again, I remember very fondly. For some reason, I really liked the Palladium role-playing game, and I think it was because it's one I found independently of anybody else. So I was like the only, I was the Palladium kid at school, and that's where it kind of were those. But that was again another crossover that was successful at the time, but I don't think anybody would look back now and go, "Oh yeah, that 1980s cartoon series, which turned that into roleplay."
I think it's like Ninja Turtles was a comic which became a role-playing game, which also became a cartoon, which was about 1987, 88, 89-ish, and then became a movie.
Yeah.
And when it came to the UK, it got Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles. It got turned into.
Because Ninja was too violent.
Yeah, but it was Ninja Turtles for the first, I think it was like 3 months of its life in the UK.
Do you know what the other change that they made?
Leonardo wasn't allowed to use his nunchucks, wasn't it? Donatello.
No, Leonardo. No, Michelangelo used
Michelangelo.
nunchucks.
Well, whichever one
Sorry,
had the nunchucks.
Michelangelo. Yeah,
Donatello used the staff. Leonardo used the katana. Raphael used the sai.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was the nunchucks. The nunchucks were banned.
But he was allowed to use sausages or anything that was nunchuck-like, just not nunchucks.
Or because it was fear that kids would go up and get sticks and hit them, yet they could have them belting people with a skateboard.
Yeah, or just a broom shank.
Yeah.
That's... Or, a giant rat.
I remember speaking to... I never told you about the American family who came into Games Workshop in Newcastle, who were talking about a bit of a sideways thing, but it links in. The kids absolutely loved it, and they came from a small town in the US, somewhere in the Midwest. They said, "Oh, there's nothing really like this. There's a little game shop." I said, "Well, if you go in, might be able to stock stuff." And I gave them some old white dwarves that we had under the counter that weren't any good, and some figures that were lying around. And the kids were over the moon. They'd had a game, and the mum took me one side and she said, "Oh, actually, she was very nice about you. We're very anti-gun people." And I went, "Oh." I said, "Oh, you do know it's all make-believe, don't you?" And there's a really interesting conversation with this American woman where no one had really said to her, "It's all make-believe." And I said, "I've never seen a 7-foot orc running down the street with a gun." I said, because that's when we've encouraged violence. Yeah, absolutely. That's the staggering thing.
If there's anywhere in the UK you're going to see an orc, it'll be Middlesbrough.
On a Saturday night.
Definitely. And I think
that's a dig at Gary, that's not a dig at you, Middlesbrough.
Yeah, or Middlesbrough, if you're pronouncing it correctly. Well, I killed that.
Yeah, I know. I was trying to get us back on track. So, I think it's because we've talked. There's quite a lot where the big. I mean, you kind of went through the Ninja Turtle, the Mutant Turtles, Ninja Hero Turtles thing there, where it was cartoon, comic, role play, movie, and it just went through the whole gamut. And it feels that happens. Like Star Wars is a big one for that. Obviously, a very, very successful movie, which people have then just tried to milk as much as. So you've taken something that was incredibly successful and gone, what can we do with that? Well, let's make a computer game out of it. Let's make a role-playing game out of it. Let's do all of this to get as much out of it. I was just thinking about what about things that have gone the other way? So you had the one that I vaguely remember, because I only saw a few episodes of it, was the Vampire the Masquerade role-play game
show
that then created its own TV show. It wasn't great.
13 of the worst hours of my life watching all of that. And that's the one I was going to bring up as the worst example of crossover. It had everything right. It had the way that the clans were portrayed was really good.
Yep.
The setting was really good. It was this kind of weird neo-romantic kind of situation. It was very political. The violence was quite graphic. But every single actor that they got in there literally chewed the scenery to pieces.
It was awful.
There was nobody was just, yeah, all right, yeah, okay. Everyone was, and now I will destroy you. Like this all the way through. The head, the prince of the city had one of the worst accents I've ever heard in my life, even though that's the actor's actual accent. It's genuinely appalling TV, and they canned it after half a season because it was that bad.
It only actually did eight episodes.
Only 8 episodes. I thought it was 13.
And the thing is, you mentioned just like Firefly, I think there's some opposites going on there, because Firefly spawned a movie, has been a role-playing game, is a board game. So
several board games.
Yeah, entirely. So it's an interesting. We're never going to see the rest of that show ever, which is a bit of a shame.
Get over it. Everyone out there, get over it.
Here you go.
Yeah. It's done.
You're
never going to see it.
Here is the ultimate crossover, though, and you're talking about Vampire the Masquerade.
Okay, if it's worse than Vampire the Masquerade, what was the actual show called though? It wasn't called Vampire the Masquerade.
It was called Kindred the Embrace.
So,
Kindred the Embarrassed.
Vampire the Masquerade crossover, right, into possibly one of the biggest like franchises, biggest entertainment, I'll say, things of the last 30 years. Vampire the Masquerade, of course. Gangrel.
Ah,
The
yes.
wrestler.
The wrestler Gangrel.
Gangrel, the wrestler, of
when
course.
They actually
And the
had
rest of his...
was all based
Brood.
on the Brood. And Edge and Christian, when they came into it as originally as the vampire hunters, weren't they? But yeah, again, that was still like kind of... I don't know if there was an official tie-in with White Wolf, or if it was
Very
just a case
unofficial.
of,
It was Vince McMahon just seeing a way to make a few quid.
yeah, like whether or not it was just a case of they once again they plundered, as the WWE do, they plunder like other culture to find references to make wrestlers out of. But yeah, Gangrel of course was like the tie-in at the time, so that there was
Vince McMahon, let's face it, Vince McMahon is the pound stretcher version of Stan Lee, let's face it. For like, abusing IP and crossovers.
Gangrel was just awful. That whole storyline of the Brood, Edge and Christian. I'm surprised Edge and Christian actually made it out into their own story, into their own career, because that was poor.
Okay,
then,
I'm going to throw a weird one at you here. It's an odd one because it's quite diverse. Marvel versus DC and how they've used their IP. So when you look at those two very big, iconic, like as from a brand point of view and a character point of view, they've got so much going on. But thinking from a nerd point of view and a gaming point of view, like think board games, think war games, I think DC has done a little bit more on the nerd front, like the hardcore nerd front, where we're seeing wargaming figures. You've seen board games for them earlier. The Marvel stuff, I'm struggling to think of like board game content.
Crisis Protocol is the big one now. That's there. Like they've gone for a full on. That's a full on tabletop game, isn't it? Whereas the two big DC licenses recently for tabletop miniatures is the Night Models Batman game, and obviously is it Monolith's?
Gotham City Chronicles.
Gotham, yeah.
That's the thing I find very interesting. There's an element, this might be tinged by my own personal views on things. I'm a big Marvel fan, so my preference is Marvel, except for Batman. And you look at all the big DC crossovers; they're all around Batman. So all the Arkham Asylum games, about 4 or 5 of them that they did, fantastic games, really, really good. The two board games we've mentioned, Gotham Knights and Gotham City Chronicles, both Batman based. Whereas Marvel, everything I've seen that they've done, so some of their kind of living card game board games
Legendary.
we've played.
Legendary was great in terms of the way that, again, really stretched the Marvel IP, because the main Legendary game was based around mainly the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and then you had a bunch of the core characters in there, and then they just released so many expansion packs. Guardians of the Galaxy expansion pack, there was a Deadpool expansion pack that added more things, and because it was a different kind of card game, it wasn't because they've done like the CCG type stuff, haven't they? Like what was the one that you got? It was the DC version of the CC, like that style game where you had like a river and it was co-op, where you were I forget what it's called. Yeah. But yeah, they had like they had a co-op card game. But I know they've both in the past, I think, done like a CCG type card game. But the thing with Legendary was because it isn't a play to win. You're playing a co-op thing, and actually you buy the packs you like because you like the IP. You're not buying the packs because they're the best for the game. Like you would do like with Crisis Protocol, I can imagine. There's a very valid reason for having a Hulk. Even if you hate the Hulk as a character, there's a valid reason for having a Hulk on your team. Whereas with Legendary, it was like, actually, do you know what? If you've got someone at the table who doesn't like the Hulk but they prefer the Fantastic Four, you take some of the characters from the Fantastic Four into the decks and you build the flavour of the game that way. But I think
and it was basically a deck building game, wasn't it? A standard deck building game, but with the Marvel IP.
Yeah.
If an interesting thing, though.
Sorry, carry on, Ben.
Come on.
Thanks. The thing I've always found surprising about DC and Marvel, and even to an extent other comic book companies, is the fact that they've never been able to translate the IP into a good role-playing game.
I've got a Batman
So,
one, and it's not great.
Yeah, DC Heroes was the first one I remember, and it was all right. Apart from there was one bit of the system that was really confusing, which was if you making gadgets. So obviously Batman's full of gadgets. You know, you're making gadgets, and you can make anything. You know, you could make a nuclear-powered submarine car using the rule, but you couldn't make a fork. You know, and Marvel as well. Marvel never got it right with their role-playing games. I don't think they ever. That neither of them have.
I can't think of a Marvel one at all.
Well,
there was Marvel.
Just talking about Batman, though, a role-playing game. Monolith have just obviously announced their Gotham City Chronicles role-play game, which I'm sure we'll be interested in when that comes out.
But the thing is that so up until about, I think it was 95, 96, which is when the Batman role-playing game came about. This is one. There was one superhero role-playing game that was the popular one. Can you remember? Golden Heroes.
Golden Hero. Oh, what a game!
Yeah, Golden Heroes. That was the go-to superhero game. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Palladium had one as well called Heroes Unlimited, which was very good. Again, Palladium though. But yeah, Golden Heroes was.
So, and here's why superhero games are problematic, and I'll tell you why. Because they all turn into the boys. Because everyone abuses their superpowers, and not in good ways, in superhero role-playing. I played Golden Heroes once, and when I played it, I was like, wow, you're just leveling buildings just to get one guy. How many people were in that building? It was like being in the boys.
So in 1984, TSR released Marvel Superheroes RPG, which I didn't know about, but I've just seen it here, and it looks like it had a couple of editions. There was a first edition, an advanced game in 1986, which used
I remember it.
Yeah, no, I remember the box art for some reason, but again, probably from a comic I was reading at the time.
So bizarrely, it's one of those the superhero. I both really wanted to play a superhero role playing game, and then at the same time, part of me went, it would just devolve into, I have my favorite superhero, so I will use the rules to create my favorite superhero. But I won't be called Bruce Banner. I'll be called Bruce Hammer.
Well,
you would just.
There was a
Tarantula Man.
There was a computer game, City of Heroes and City of Villains, wasn't there, where you could essentially do that? You know, they weren't licensed, but you could essentially build your favourite superhero or supervillain in the computer game format.
They got into a bit of trouble about it as well.
Superhero role-play games have come on quite a lot in the last few years. There's some around and about nowadays that are actually very good and quite balanced, and actually, you know, kind of look at and do a good job of making themselves be a little bit, you know, making the characters be a little bit more responsible. There's a really good PBTA one called where you play teenage superhero just kind of coming into their powers. They don't have building leveling,
like Teen Titans kind of thing.
Kind of, yeah, but it's, you know, they're going through puberty and they're at high school, so you know, a good GM kind of adds those bits in as well. There's another one called Wild Talents, which is absolutely superb. Mechanic, it's a brilliant game. The book is huge.
So I mean, I guess this is more getting into systems I'd like to play rather than our main topic. So I'll get off this quite quickly. But the one thing I've always been interested in with superhero is doing a superhero role playing game, but non-traditional. So, you know, a superhero role playing game, but in the Wild West, or, you know, a Victoriana steampunky kind of superhero game.
So the Wild Talents, there's a podcast I listen to, Happy Jacks, and they did a superhero Wild West game using the Wild Talents rules.
Oh, okay.
Called, Wild Talent. I can't remember. But I'll tell you. Let's throw a link down here for it. If you like listening to, you know, play along, or not play along.
Listen through
I
games.
think
Listen along games. We'll put links down here.
I think generally as well for superhero role-playing games, for a Batman role-playing game, it's like, well, I'm Batman. Who are you? Everyone else is just an ancillary character, and that's the problem. And that's what made me think why. I wonder why there was never an X-Men role-playing game, because that would have given you a whole range to tap into. And if you think for who they are, a lot of them are younger people. I never understood why X-Men didn't get a role-playing tie-in.
They did do the talking about Marvel games.
They did.
The ones
The
we
Marvel
got,
superheroes had a supplement.
but we did one of the games that I think you bought them, didn't you? In the Dice Masters stuff, which was kind of like it was one of these odd collectible dice games, like a mystery bag, where each mystery bag you got like a handful of these special dice and a couple of the character cards that went with them, and you basically the mechanic was nice, but it was a little bit clunky to play, and we played it a couple of times to try and get used to the rules, and we actually liked it. And then once you got the idea of how you build your decks with the dice, a bit like your Destiny was with Star Wars, but more where you had a massive bag. You each had a big dice bag, each full of all your heroes, and they got power ups and stuff. And I bought a ton of that, and it was just one of those ones where we didn't really there wasn't enough about it to hook us in and play it. But again, that was one of those ones where, like Dice Masters, like that system, they went. I think they had the Marvel X-Men versus whoever it was first, and then they went and grabbed loads of different IPs to run through that Dice Masters system in the same way that Legendary did. So Legendary had, it did there was the Game of Thrones spin-off, and there was an Alien spin-off, and there was all sorts of spin-offs from Legendary. I think one of the
HeroClix as well.
Yeah, HeroClix has been a big one.
HeroClix, really good. And again, that crosses over
tons of IPs, Star Wars.
But the rules are good enough that you can cross-play everything, so it works out.
And the minis are good enough as well.
One of the prime times I think for getting IP crossover stuff or games made from other IPs was mid to late 90s. On the back of Magic the Gathering's boom, there was all these companies that were like, okay, we need to make a collectible card game. What can we do? And there's no, we could either spend time building our own stuff, or we could license some IP. And I think, I think Cypher Games did the Star Wars one. At the time, there was a Star Wars CCG, which I've got a box of them, nearly a full set up on a shelf there.
I was 7 short of a full set.
That was really pretty as well.
Well, they had all the movie stills, but also the way that they did, and I think there was a running gag about Cypher, was that essentially they would take the script, take the Star Wars script, and they just basically put a cut every 5 lines, and that 5-line section became a card. Because you could almost, if you had the full set of cards, you could almost build the entire Star Wars script out of the titles. And then there was there was a brilliant, and again, this is probably late 90s, early 2000s, there was a brilliant Aliens versus Predator card game where there was
some bad Aliens tie-ins.
You had an Aliens deck, a Predator deck, and a Marines deck, and you could play it as 1 versus 1, or you could play it as one, all 3 in, and you actually built the colony or the spaceship or whatever where you were playing. You built it so you played certain rooms onto the table that you could utilize. And the Predator, depending on which Predator you took, you had you could take a low points cost Predator, which meant it was an easier win, but actually your Predator was low skilled and didn't have any kit. Or you could take one of the Master Hunters and be like, okay, I'm going to take the Predator, I'm going to put the shoulder cannon, the chameleon thing, the invisibility, I'm going to put his spear, I'm going to put his throwing disc all into my deck, which means I've got to actually take more skulls, I've got to get more honor out of the game before I win. And then the Marines were obviously in they had to rescue so many civilians that were inside the deck, so again you'd seed your deck with civilians, and then the alien just basically had to find and impregnate as many civilians as they could. So you had this really cool dynamic of everyone going against each other. And again, I've almost got a full set of the originals, and it was only when they brought out the second edition where the cards went really ropey, because again they'd used all of the cool movie stills they had and all the lines from the film and all the equipment from the films in the first edition, and the second edition came out, the first expansion, and it was all these horrible CGI versions of things that were never in any of the movies, and they'd just kind of gone, we'll just have a new version of the pulse rifle called the pulse rifle, Mark IV, and we'll draw it and we'll put a bayonet onto it, and there.
Yeah.
But that was
so
like...
that's an IP worth talking about. Sorry for...
No.
No, you go for it.
Yeah, so Aliens as a crossover IP.
Yeah, I'm going to jump straight.
Really, really good.
They killed me. They killed me. Iron Crown Enterprises role-playing game. Jesus, what a stinker. It was awful. Awful, awful game. It was really bad. I'll never let it go.
Fair.
I hate that game.
There was a recent miniatures game, wasn't there, that came out?
By
Prodos.
Yeah.
And they had some
really
nice
nice
miniatures, because they did the clear resin predators, weren't they? So you'd have the invisible predators. It was one that I wanted to get in on, but I think the Kickstarter, when that came out, was like way out of my budget at the time, so I just didn't bother investing in that. But
again,
I jumped on that Kickstarter.
Didn't back it up properly.
Yeah, and they were Kickstarter because there was they'd went retail, and there was people waiting over 12 months after they'd gone retail for their Kickstarter order. They were a bad Kickstarter, and I think that's probably why they lost the license so early, and why they were selling stuff off so cheap. And the thing is that they overpriced on that IP as well. It was very expensive for what you were getting.
Yeah, I remember the dropship and the buggy,
the APC.
Yeah,
the APC, beautiful, absolutely stunning, but I think the dropship was best part of 200 notes.
Yeah. The APC was like 99 quid, I think.
God.
Something like that. Just beautiful, absolutely stunning, but ridiculous. But AVP, so yeah, there's a new Aliens role-playing game that's out and about at the moment, which is all right actually.
Yeah, it looks good.
Played a couple of sessions. It's got some interesting ideas, but the computer game.
Which
the
one?
The most scary, frightening AVP.
Yep.
The one where you play Marines, and it's pitch black, and you're walking around, and it's pitch black, and you're dead. And that was basically it. That was if you play Marines, that's how the game went,
so,
as far as I could tell.
Is that the one where you could play any faction, and they all played incredibly differently? Yeah.
So the first time when that came out, I think Kel got a demo of it, and I went over to his house one night, and he just set up this 5.1 surround on his PC anyway. And Kel, he used to have his room was everything was black, painted black furniture, and he had blackout blinds, right? So when he put the light off in his room, it was like not just pitch black, it was like so black you can't see your hand in front of your face. Bless you.
Bless you.
Bless you, my son.
And he put the demo on, and the demo was like the first level where you were a Marine, and you just had to get through the level, and you had your little you had to
go like 20 meters,
and you just had that
a blast of steam would go.
But it was you had the pulse, the click. You just had the click, and then every now and then you get the beep, and you'd be like, "What's that?"
Yeah.
And because it was on surround sound, you'd hear the noises coming from around you, and that terrified me. That
first game that used surround sound.
I don't know if it was one that used it really well.
So
and, we used to play that multiplayer a lot, where one of my mates was phenomenal at using the alien, where we could have, I think you could play 8 players, we could have 7 Marines against 1 alien, and he could pretty much take everybody out without being seen, because he's
Did the aliens, am I remembering right, did they see everything in kind of like a red haze? Or was that one of their views they had?
That was the Predator.
The Predator had multiple views, so it could go from IR through to UV, couldn't it?
And you could if you were, because I'm not sure if this was because they did a later game, and that may be what I'm thinking of. But
AVP
the Predator,
Gold, you're thinking of.
The Predator could see. You actually had to switch your views, because if you were fighting Marines, you needed to be in thermal view, and if you were hunting aliens, you needed the other one.
Yeah, you did it on AVP as well. So you had to switch if you were playing like a multiplayer, multi-faction game, you had to switch because otherwise you wouldn't see them all.
Because I remember making myself feel very, very ill playing the alien in that game because
the dimensions you could
Predator and human, they were like, here is the ground. I walk along the ground, and if you jump, I jump. Whereas every single surface to the alien was the same as every other surface, so the screen was just whipping round, and you didn't know which way was up half the time.
If you like that and you like being terrified,
probably one of the best computer game crossovers ever.
It was very good. So, it was very, very good.
Try Alien Isolation. Fantastic. Absolutely incredible game. I've never spent so much time crapping myself hiding in cupboards as playing that game.
Is that the one where you're unarmed? You're basically just trying to escape, get out, yeah.
You literally, you kind of like, you rip, it feels more like Alien. It feels more like the first film. You play this engineer and you dock on this space station where the synthetics are like a really basic form of synthetic called a duo. They're terrifying on their own. They're all programmed to like attack any intruder, and they're brutal. But the alien, holy shit! All you can do is hide from it in a cupboard, and you've even got to hold your breath because the alien can sense the pheromones in your breath. So you've got to hold your breath at the right time. And you can lean back in the cupboard as the alien just goes by the grill. Oh Jesus, it's mortifyingly bad. It took AVP to a whole new level. Try it. It's probably cheap as chips.
Did you find yourself holding your breath while you were trying to hold your breath in the game?
Yeah, and when you lean back, I was leaning back. It was just awful. Buy that game. It scarred me.
So I think there's a lot of the big franchises. When we've talked a lot of the big franchises. So you've got Alien, you've got Star Wars. I mean, we've talked about the Marvel and DC. I think a lot of the companies, like computer game companies and gaming companies of whatever genre, role player, board game, are always going to look at them going, how can we market that IP and what ideas can we bring to them? I was just thinking one day as we were talking and coming back to the other way of a game that is now branching out, and it's Magic the Gathering, which has agreed a TV deal with Netflix. So they're doing a Magic animated show, and I was double checking because I couldn't think if it was just one of those apocryphal tales that I'd heard, but no, it's they've got the Russo brothers to executive produce it, so it's getting some decent backing, and they're also doing a Magic MMO. So they're looking at their incredibly successful card game and thinking, what more can we do with this?
They were one of the ones that they had the card game. Obviously, the card game's been super successful for years, and then they've had the computer game version of it, which has been really successful. And in fact, it was the computer game that got you playing Magic, because
it was their less good computer games that got me playing. Now they've got Arena, I'm just back hooked again.
It was the 2012 version on the Xbox because, like I say, we'd played Magic for years and then stopped playing it for whatever reason. And then my brother
Power creep usually.
Yeah, Lee had downloaded the Xbox version of the game, and he was sitting playing it one night, and me and Kel were around it at Lee's house, and Lee was doing like the challenges. Oh, we've lost Ben.
Oh, we've lost Ben.
He'll be back in a second. There we go.
Duel of the Planeswalkers.
Yeah,
Duel of the Planeswalkers. You did, mate, yeah.
So, and Lee was doing one of the challenges on Duel of the Planeswalkers where you basically had to... You had like, here's a deck, here's a hand of cards. You've got one turn to finish this game. So there was already like you were already midway through the game. You got one turn to finish this before they beat you. Like you've got one life left, they've got full 20, and you've got one hand, and you've got one turn to do it. And my brother was stuck on this, and me and Kel were sitting looking at it, and Kel used to be like one of these almost kind of, he can like see the Matrix in Magic cards. Like he put together a deck once, so this is probably fourth edition probably. He put together a deck where before I'd even drawn a card, he had removed my entire deck from the game, from his starting hand. He was just right, you're infinite loop, your entire deck's being removed from the game. That was kind of how good he was at tuning a deck and building a deck. So me and him sat there looking at this puzzle, and we worked out, because of the Magic stack timing, like how you do it. And it got me thinking about Magic and playing Magic. I've still got loads of cards, and we just mentioned it to Ian. Oh, this happened, and he went, "Oh, I'll have a look at that." And there was a promo on at the time where I think if you downloaded the game, if you bought Duel of the Planeswalkers, they gave you you got a voucher to take to Travelling Man or Forbidden Planet or wherever, and they would give you a little starter box of cards and a foil, like a rare card or something like that, a mythic rare foil.
Exactly what it was.
And so we all did that, and then we also realised that because the email they send you, they would randomise which one you got sent, and there was like 3 or 4 different ones to get. And all you had to do was go in and tweak the HTML, and it would show you a different one, so you could then go to 4 different shops and get 4 different Planeswalkers if you got 4 different mythics. But that's what got us into playing Magic again, and then started our obsession with spreadsheets, and the fact that I've got a cupboard that used to be a 4x12 amplifier, base amplifier, which has probably got about close to 200,000 cards in it, sitting there.
Yeah. I've still got. Yeah, I mean, we're getting ready to move house, and I think a load of my swaps are going in. I'll probably keep my
deck, but you want to keep a playable deck, don't you?
Or I want to keep one of every card that I've got, and get rid of the swaps. Because I'm a hoarder, Ben. You know that well.
See, I originally used to keep them. We used to keep
Look at me and Sven. We're all like that.
We used to keep 6 of every card. That used to be the thing. And
4.
No, I'm saying it used to be 6 of every card. Then they changed the tournament rules. So when I first started playing, it was 6 of every card. Then they changed the ruling where you could only have 4 of every card in your deck, and that's when we started chopping down to 4 of every card. But yes, wow. I mean, Magic have been very good at doing their crossover. So let's say there's the computer games. They did a tie-in with IDW a few years ago for comics. And again, Magic were very clever where they did the thing where when you bought the comic, you got a card. So if you're a comics fan who likes fantasy comics, you'd buy the comic and go, "Oh, I've got a free card." If you're a Magic player...
Mike keeps rubbing on his zip.
Yeah, is it your mic, Sven?
Very probably.
I was rubbing on the zip.
I'll hand it. I'll hold it off.
You need to trim again, mate. Get your Riker beard back.
Yeah, so if you're a comics fan, you'd go and buy a comic and get a card and go, "Oh, what's this for?" And if you're a Magic fan, you'd go and buy the comic to get the card. So it was brilliant, like kind of for expanding their IP and their customer base.
I'm going to go old school one. I'm going to bring one up. Howard Phillips Lovecraft and his beloved Call of Cthulhu mythos.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
That has spawned some interesting stuff. I think is it 6th or 7th edition the role playing game's on now?
7th, I'm gonna say, possibly 8th.
Yeah. I know one of the guys who was the editor in chief for a guy called Mike Mason. And that's
Chaosium as well.
Yeah,
been with them ever since the beginning.
Absolutely, and they've held on to that very, very well, and that has spawned computer games. There was the Mythos card game.
Alone in the Dark.
Alone in the Dark was inspired by it.
7th edition, good shout, Ben.
Yeah.
Well, if you think on Cthulhu Mythos, you've got all of the stuff like
True Detective,
Elder Sign, and Arkham Horror, and all the things. I mean, Arkham Horror. It's such a nice board game.
Game.
You've got to have like a 6x4 table and a good few hours. I mean, I'm not even joking. Like my games table that we play on, the one in my games room, is like 5x3, and that's just big enough to get all the counters and stuff out. But we've played Arkham Horror a few times, and I mean, Elder Sign, I like a lot more because it's quicker.
There's the Mansions of Madness game that they brought out recently is really popular as well.
Yeah,
my other gaming friends, they played it when a session I couldn't attend, and they said it was fantastic.
Well, Mansions of Madness, I think, is a spin-off again of Arkham Horror. So Elder Sign and Mansions of Madness are like smaller versions of Arkham Horror, essentially. The thing with the Cthulhu stuff is that because I guess Cthulhu itself isn't really an IP, there's so many games that use Cthulhu in there somewhere. So I mean, there's a game that it was on
Cthulhu
Tabletop,
Wars.
and that I love is Unspeakable Words. Which is your classic kind of word play game, but you've got the thing of going mad. So the more points the letters have in the actual letter, the more you score for it. But then the easier it is to lose your mind. But when you lose your mind, you get to just invent words because you've been possessed by Cthulhu and you believe those words are real things. And it's such a great game to play.
But 5th edition D&D, the Warlock class, you can have your patron as one of the great old ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was
wide Munchkin.
Yeah.
Which is a huge, which does a lot of crossover in itself, but Munchkin Cthulhu as well.
Well, the Munchkin games are ones that are very good for taking IPs and working them in to make different variants of the game. I mean, you think there's Munchkin, there's a 40k Munchkin, there's Wizard of Oz, you've got zombies, whatever floats your boat, superheroes or whatever. There's tons of stuff in Munchkin, and they even did for Munchkin Apocalypse, they did a Judge Dredd crossover, which I've still not got yet, but it's one of the things that's on me to get list because of my Dredd fascination. Speaking of Dredd, I mean, there's a crossover that's been around for years.
There's a good one, definitely.
And that's really interesting with the with Rebellion recently buying that movie studio in Oxfordshire. That's going to have the whole 2000 AD IP is now absolutely blow up. The guys that are in charge of, they've got a good handle of what they have as.
You're cutting in and out there, Ben.
You might have a loose wire.
I think it's the connection more than anything else, but...
Oh, hang on.
Any better? We're back.
Yeah, you seem back.
Hey, back.
It's because for me, your video never changes. It's just your audio cuts in and out.
Oh, right.
Sorry for the technical difficulties, folks.
These things happen.
Don't know what it is. Maybe it's Tuesdays in the north. Just saying that the 2000 AD IPs and Rebellion have got such a good handle on how to push those IPs now.
Yeah.
We're starting to see more board games and tabletop games and role-play games coming off them. Yeah. The miniatures game is picking up again. The TV and film studio that's going to get lots of good stuff coming out of it. The Dread TV show that they're talking about. There's a Strontium Dog film in production.
Rogue Trooper.
Rogue Trooper, not Strontium Dog. The Rogue Trooper film. Yeah. So much stuff coming from 2008.
Yeah.
And coming back to something this goes back probably 10, 15 years. Longer than I'd like to think. They did their own card game. Or the IP was released for the Judge Dredd card game, and it only did I remember actually going to a couple of Comic Cons, or local Comic Cons, but they did one edition, so they did one set. I don't think it was, whether it was not as successful as they expected it to be or not, but I remember taking a couple of cards to some of those cons to get them signed by the artists. And two different artists went, "Oh, this is a really good card." Yeah, I remember doing it. It was all original artwork. It was none of this. It was not extracted from the comics. Everyone was original, and they both went, "Oh yeah, I never got paid for doing that." So it was like, "Oh,
and that's why they only did one edition."
Yeah.
Well, I think at the time the card game stuff, it was a thing. It was very popular to have a card game, a CCG. If you think of going back to some of the games that we've raved on about, like Mutant Chronicles and Deadlands, they were both game systems where they could have just stayed as a role play, but they actually pushed themselves in to try and hit as many spheres of the gaming world as they could. So both Deadlands and Mutant Chronicles had a miniatures a game. So they both had tabletop versions of the game. So you had Great Rail Wars and you had Warzone, but then you also had kind of self-contained box games like Siege of the Citadel, and there was a Blood Bearers game. And there was some ones for Deadlands the same. They both had CCGs, like it was a Doom Towns.
Doom Trooper.
And Doom Trooper for they both went and tried to hit all the different like
Computer
parts of the
games as well.
Venn diagram really of the what was the miniatures gaming or tabletop gaming world at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it got had the complete gamut: computer games, CC.
And as maybe start wrapping up as we finish, and all of that came from one very, very good movie. Sorry.
Isolation be damned. So just a few other off the top of my head crossover IPs that I remember. Battlestar Galactica board game,
Right.
where you play the Cylons, or where you
Yeah.
find the Cylon. What a game! Again, brilliant IP. Nothing else from it that I'm aware of. No roleplay games, no computer games, anything.
I think they might have done a card game.
Yeah, I remember a card
Oh,
game.
yeah.
Everything did a card game.
Yeah.
Other ones.
Babylon 5.
Babylon 5. Oh, yeah. The roleplay game for that. I actually worked on.
Really?
It was Mongoose Publishing got the IP first time round. And yeah, the first edition and second edition roleplay game for that were very good. Very good.
Conan. Because we haven't mentioned Conan. And that is a very powerful IP. It's been done very, very well. Card games, board games,
So
role-playing games.
The stuff
done by Modiphius as well.
When I was thinking about this the other day, there was a few that like popped up where it's not a direct IP, but they're like inspired. So I was reading the rulebook for SPQR, the Warlord Games skirmish, Roman skirmish game, and in the opening ramble for the SPQR book, it actually says, as much as they went for historical accuracy because of the the nature of the period of time that they're dealing with, there's not really a lot of record on some of it. So what they instead said was they wanted a game system that flowed like the movies, and they actually name check Spartacus and 300 in the opening ramble of the book because that they wanted the game to be inspired by that as much as they did the history. And then you've also got stuff that's like, probably one of my favourite miniature games right now, 7TV, is like the ultimate in terms of
riffing on everything.
You name a TV show or a comic or a movie or whatever you want, and you can probably out there find some miniatures that you can work up into a cast to do your own version of. And it's never going to be the same as having a full IP licensed thing. But
a Flash Gordon movie cast, like a proper cast, would be amazing.
Well, that's
I know they did Sam Jones.
Well, they've done some stuff with in the last one, the pulp sci-fi. They had like what's he called? Brian Blessed's character,
Voltar.
Voltar, and
Voltar,
they had
the Hawk dude.
They had like they had a very few various different characters that were based off Flash Gordon movie. In that last pulp sci-fi.
I tell you, an IP that was very cleverly worked. That's become slowly will become a very dead IP. Is Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I read a really interesting article 2 days ago, funnily enough, that actually said about it's the IP that's killed itself because of the way that last series was handled. It's like you've still got people, if you go to Twitter, tweeting about Big Bang Theory and Friends, but they says it's actually very hard to find a Game of Thrones tweet.
Yeah.
They said in the modern age that just shows how poisonous that terrible last season has actually killed their IP.
Yeah.
Well, Game of Thrones, like when that was at its height, kind of at the second and third season, it was you always knew the big IPs. If you went to Forbidden Planet, there'd be an entire aisle in Forbidden Planet of that, and you went into Travelling Manor, you looked at the games section, and they had a miniatures game, they had a CCG, they had board games, like all based off their IP, and.
But weirdly though, the role play game and the miniatures game didn't come out till quite late.
Yeah.
They were like they were kind of season 7, season 8, weren't they?
Yeah.
When they
I've watched Guerrilla Miniatures Games channel play the game, and it's a Warhammer knockoff. It's quite well, but it's more based around the heroes. But it's okay. It just doesn't present very well.
I've heard it's alright.
Yeah.
I know it looks nice, but I've heard it's alright.
Once again, but the IP now that's going nowhere. It's a dead IP.
Yeah. Well, until they do the new series, you know, the prequel series and things like this, and it kind of gets a bit more life into it. But yeah, I think you're right. Actually, that last scene killed it off entirely.
So here's a one to wrap up on then. So, which IP would you want a tabletop or a CCG or a roleplay of? So think of an IP where it hasn't been serviced yet. It might be, or it might even be, you know, there was a one version of it 20 years ago, but there hasn't been anything since, and it's an IP that you absolutely love. So I've just even put this out there, and I can't even think of much myself,
So
to be fair.
I'll go, because literally I was thinking of wrapping up with exactly the same question, so I already have my answer.
So was I.
So for me,
I didn't think that.
So for me, Ben, and I'm sure you'll jump in and go, well, actually, I think you'll find they did do something on this, because you do have a bit of an encyclopedic knowledge in these things. It's the Dresden Files.
Yeah, role-playing game was released a couple of years ago. It's not very good, but it has spawned its own rule system off the back of it.
So
I would show as well.
The TV show was not good. I would really like a TV show
Really
done
bad.
in the more modern Netflix style. But I'd like either a CCG or a something in that world. I love the Dresden Files world. I think it's really, really good. 2010. I'll check that out.
Yeah, Dresden Files roleplay game, and it's what spawned the Fate system.
Oh, okay.
So, and I like the Fate system. The Fate system's a really good mechanic. But the Dresden File was the IP that spawned the Fate.
Okay. So that's my one. Ben?
I've got several that I'd really like to see. Farscape, I think, is crying out for a really good role-play game. Probably won't get one. I think the Rivers of London, I think that might be interesting. And I can't remember if Neverwhere was ever. I think Neverwhere would make.
So we got the Neverwhere, and I didn't quite hear what you said after that. But
I was just thinking, I can't remember if Neverwhere was ever converted to a role-play game or not. I'm going to have a look.
So while you're having a look,
Neverwhere would be the one I would like. Oh yeah, 3rd edition.
The IP, and again, I've done a quick search and there's nothing that jumped out immediately to say there was or anything, but the IP that I've probably sunk more hours into than anything over the last 25 years is probably the Diablo universe. And having a role play, or maybe not a full tabletop game, but having a role play based in the Diablo universe, or having, you know, like a Siege of the Citadel style dungeon crawler game. So it's essentially a tabletop version of Diablo, but similar. But I think a role play with all the Diablo universe, just so that I can do Deckard Cain impressions as a GM. I can make you go to every shop. We'll have Deckard Cain standing there telling you to stay a while and listen.
Stay a while and listen.
With the voice which got repurposed for Bane, apparently. But yeah, Diablo would be the IP. I know there was a few attempts at a Diablo RPG, or like converting rules for RPGs into Diablo universe. But I think actually,
I could only find conversions. Couldn't find a rule set.
If there was a book with all the artwork, all the weapons, you know, the character. Because if you think about Diablo 2, and Diablo 3, the character classes and the range of characters you had across there, and all the weapons, and the fact you had you've got pre-built all the stat lines, and you've got the items of note. You know, if you could basically, you know, like stumble into a dungeon and find Wirt's leg, and use that as a club, which you could in the early levels, it'd be fantastic. So that would be the one that I think would be perfect. Again, it's licensed by Blizzard, so if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be Blizzard.
Yeah. Finally, Gary?
I've got two.
Okay.
So one's going to sound a bit twee, but when you think about the possibilities for miniatures and armies, I think a World of Warcraft tabletop game could look spectacular.
You mean a miniatures
game?
I love the movie almost as much as I would say it.
I think
I do love the movie though.
the proportions on the figures, and a lot of people say, well, Workshop have already done it, but I'm just thinking an army of Taurans would look amazing. You know, the knights, you've got loads of creatures you could bring in. They've got such a wonderful, diverse, and huge world. You can have an amazing array of armies that would look spectacular, and would paint up beautifully.
So if anyone from Blizzard is listening, that's 2 that you've got to build now.
Yeah, yeah. And the other one is a more recent one, the Red Dead Redemption franchise. I'd love to see miniatures for that.
Yeah.
Because it's the setting is, it's just the Wild West, but it's so well done. But those characters are fantastic, and I'd love to inhabit them in some way, either in role playing or do them as a skirmish game in some way.
Well, we'll do Red Deadlands Redemption. How is that?
Yeah, I was going to say.
I like it.
Wild
I
West
like it.
Exodus exists, which kind of scratches that itch a little bit. But I've got a Red Dead Redemption story. I'll tell you after.
Well,
Cool. So shall we wrap up there? That brings it all to a nice end.
It's been a good chat, and I say we could probably revisit this topic 100 more times and find stuff, especially for certain companies like GW.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
And that. I bet you if we actually researched it properly, we could do a full series on GW's licensing over the years, or lack of licensing and things. But I think it's been a good little ramble on.
If you're one of our regular people who watch these rambles and you like it, why not put something in the comments about what you'd like us to talk about? So if there's a topic or a bit of IP you want us to explore and talk a little bit about and look into, please let us know in the comments below.
Any obvious IPs that we've missed?
Yeah.
Or crossovers that we missed as well, put them down there as well.
Or even if you find out an obscure miniatures game of the things we've been talking about, or a role-playing game, send us the link so we can have a look at it. That'd be great. And so that covers everything, I think. It's been a really good little ramble.
It's just basically the usual. So don't forget to like, share, subscribe on the YouTube and hit the notify bell just to make sure that you keep up to date with whenever we post this stuff. Share
below
it with your friends, and make sure obviously you share and go and like our various social medias like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, which are all below. And hopefully at some point these will make their way to SoundCloud, so you know there will be other content coming via SoundCloud in the future now that we have that channel. Apologies for any sound issues tonight, because obviously we are trying to do this remotely with whatever kit we've cobbled together. And
we are average.
And we are very average. So sorry about that, but we'll just get better as we go on, and maybe one day we'll actually sit in the same room and do this. Who knows? But I think for us, episode 5 of the Average Lockdown Cast, I'll say goodbye from me, Sven.
And from me, Ian.
From me, Carrie.
Oh, I'll go last then. Cheers very much for joining us. I was Ben, and bye-bye for now.